Hello, and welcome to the Craveable Podcast, where real matters. We are your hosts, Ben and Katie, and this show is brought to you by Fossil Farms. We have a very interesting topic today, which we have dubbed, Maybe It's Me.
Why is that? Why are we asking a question?
Well, we're going to talk today about meat alternatives, or plant-based meat, or...
Yeah, more specifically, plant-based meat.
Plant-based meat, that's true.
A misnomer? Mayhaps not. Maybe.
I do. Well, I guess, because it's not, I would say it's not a misnomer if there's quotes around the word meat. Plant-based meat.
She's doing air quotes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching the video. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I found some pretty interesting things, but I've been kind of gabbing to you about them throughout the day. So, I don't know. Did you have any opening thoughts or comments that you'd like to share?
On plant-based meat, do I have thoughts? I have so much. I have 2 pages of notes, which is like a lot for me, because normally I'm ripping off the top of my head. It's hard because I don't know where to start on the conversation, right? Like, I think we should start maybe with our personal experience with plant-based meat. I've had it. I think it's okay at best. You know, a decent alternative at worst. I don't really know. It's just one of those things. I've had it. I have a vegan friend. We ended up doing some like Beyond Sausage, like Alfredo pasta one day with like a vegan milk and everything. And it was good. Tasted really good. And everybody was like, oh, this is really good. We like this. But it's not exactly the same. And I think for me as a big meat eater, I can tell the difference. But if you're already a flexitarian or you're moving towards more vegetarian, they'll maybe meat once or twice a week. And that's a great alternative for you for whatever other reasons that you're moving to plant-based, then I think it is a good alternative so people have options. However, I also don't think we're quite there yet in replacing meat. I surely, for the sake of my job and my palate, hope we never replace meat. And I think we have a conversation about raising meat the right way very often. So I'm still of the mind that there's a right way to do it. The majority of people do it wrong. So I don't think the switch is necessary yet. However, I see a lot of benefits in what they do.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to not eat bacon. I think we can literally all agree to that. There's some things that I know are bad for me. I know are bad for the planet, and it ends an animal's life ending to get its belly. And it is, for all intents and purposes, absolutely worth it. So we'll start with that. How do you feel about your plant-based meats?
Yeah, that's a good question for me because I haven't had any kind of plant-based meat or meat alternative in at least 10 years. I mean, this goes back to when I used to be a vegetarian, which was, high school or late high school into college. Might even be late middle school into college, but that was back when I was trying all the things. I will never forget the one year for Thanksgiving that my dad had like either like a turkey breast or a small turkey for my brother and I got a tofurkey. And I mean, this was very long ago, but I maintain to this day that it was the most vile thing I have ever eaten. I literally took one bite and I was like, I'm so sorry that you spent your money on this. Like, I can't even swallow it. Like, it was so bad. And I know it's come a long way since then, but
yeah,
like you said, I mean, I'm lucky enough to work in an industry in a building where I can take elk medallions home for dinner and like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Like,
yeah,
I don't really need to go out and buy
I've just
a
eaten
Beyond
the
Burger.
most sustainable, healthy meat on the planet, and I have zero guilt about it. And I paid fair wage price. Of, wow, this is great.
So it's, I don't know. There's definitely a part, especially after doing some of this slight research, like there is certainly a part of me that's very curious about some of the things that are on the market today. And honestly, I kind of feel like I would be doing myself a disservice in this industry to not try some of it. So certainly that's on my list of to-dos. But as of yet, I don't feel that I am versed or experienced in like the modern options for plant-based meat.
And things have changed. I think that's where we should maybe start. And I'm going to put 2 caveats in the beginning of this. One, our favorite joke. We're not doctors. Any nutritional information, any facts, go.
They're not
feel
facts.
free to do your own research. I tried to take the best information I could find that has studies backing up most of the facts in terms of any of the numbers that we end up looking at. And then the other part is that we sell meat, and there's bias in the conversation, right? Inherent. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. I have a few important points I will make by the end of this, but today there's tons of options for plant-based meat, and there will be significantly more in the future. It's getting better. I don't want to switch because it's, I think if I was going to switch, I'd go to like some sort of lab grown meat once they have,
really?
some sort of efficacy of research of that. And they're proving that it's, sustainable, that it's cost effective, that it's not harming anybody. It's environmentally sound. I think that ultimately would be the perfect move if they can make it exactly like real meat. But there's so much in between what they're doing now and what the dream is that could take anywhere from 40 to 50 years, or maybe not even in my lifetime, to come to fruition. So the alternative is these plant-based meats. You have your Beyond Burgers, your Impossible Burgers, you have your plant-based cheeses. I don't think we're going to end up talking about that much, like the Diet brand or anything, but they're getting really close to being like meat. And then I get stuck in this philosophical quandary, right? Of what's the point of eating a meat alternative? Why not just not eat meat? Right?
It's actually, I'm going to let you, I don't want to interrupt you and let you finish, but what you're saying aligns very well with a super interesting article that I...
No, you go, because that's basically my point. I struggle to find the in-between where if you're comfortable eating meat, why not source your meat better?
This is great. This is great that you said it's as if we discussed this before. We did not.
We did not.
So I am going to reference my notes a little bit, so apologies in advance. But I came across this really interesting article from the Washington Post called "The Big Problem with Plant-Based Meat," the meat part. And I'm like, that's interesting. So there's a lot of research on it, and plant-based meat, when it first came around, was like skyrocketing. And then in recent years, stocks and just movement have lowered.
Yeah,
and a lot of these companies,
little.
have been like letting go of 6% of their workforce a couple of years ago. And a lot of people who are researching this feel like the problem might be the one thing that was kind of supposed to make it popular is it's their attempt to be indistinguishable from meat. So it actually delves a bit into like human psychology, where it's like, okay, we're mimicking real meat, but then in our brains, we get this comparison of like authenticity and like what's real. And so like, it's like we're looking at the shelf, right? And we're like, oh, it's just almost a real thing. And us as consumers and humans, we're like, yeah, but
it's not.
You're not really real. And then there's this whole other piece that I think is so interesting, where we tend to, as consumers, we tend to simplify foods into basically like a good and a bad group. And like, this is good for you and this is bad for you. And that also goes into advertising, right? Like they mentioned here, like Haagen-Dazs is marketed for its creaminess and its decadence, right? And spinach is marketed for being super healthy and full of iron, you know what I mean? And we kind of like think of these things as we purchase. So what's very interesting about the plant-based meat is it kind of pulls on both sectors. Like we want to think of it as this like virtuous thing, like it's good, it's healthy, it's good for the planet. But then one kind of snag that they run into is these ingredients lists, which are super, super long and essentially puts them in the category of an ultra processed food.
Correct.
Which is then tugs on the vice or the bad category. And so you have that, and they do research. It's like when consumers are faced with the option of something sustainable or something healthy, they choose healthy. And then you have the whole separate problem where right now, plant-based meats are still be like 2 to 3 times more expensive than traditional meats.
Yeah, that's a scaling issue. I think that'll solve itself quickly.
It is a scaling issue, but so you have consumers who are like, okay, we want to be healthy. Sustainability is important, but like this is like, they want me to think this is healthy, but all these ingredients and it feels kind of weird. It's not really healthy. And then it's cheaper for me to just eat the stuff that I know is better for me. It's not ultra processed. So I'm just going to buy the regular meat.
Yeah, because you think it's better for you.
Well,
going for like $1.99 ground beef, but that is way worse for you than eating a plant-based burger.
And well, agreed. And then so one last thing I wanted to say, well, a couple last things about this article is they say, taste is prioritized above all else when it comes to alternative meats. And then they point out this, I think this is really funny. I'll quote them here. It says, part of the issue is exactly who is the customer for the bleeding pink in the middle plant-based burger copy. It's a bit like the all-electric Ford F-50 truck or the Hummer EV.
Right, yeah.
You have this like gas guzzling vehicle that is now electric and like friendly for that. It's like, who is that?
Yeah, a dichotomous identity in the product itself. So who's going for it and how do they project their identity?
Yeah. So I thought that article was super. I mean, the fact that it touched on the psychology and everything, I was like, that is super interesting. I never would have thought about it that way.
And that's something I was looking at too. And you touched on a point, which is really that a lot of people who are trying to compare healthiness, quote unquote, of plant-based meat to other processed foods is they're doing it to processed meats, right? So they're like, look, we know it's highly processed, so we'll compare it to something else that's processed. And the reality is that if it's a burger and I could, to your point, just take ground beef and form a patty and eat it, and it's one ingredient, ground beef, and it's not as processed, not as full of sodium, I'm getting more iron, B12, and zinc, then why am I not eating the beef patty?
And spending less money doing it.
Yeah, spending less money. So they constantly compare and they're like, well, technically plant-based meat has less sodium and more protein than it would for processed foods like chicken fingers, or what else did I write down? Bacon, meatballs, burgers, sausages, coated poultry, and plain poultry. And it's looking at those processed foods that they use for plant-based. And I'm just like, the real version of those, outside of maybe bacon and sausage, is very likely the healthier option still to this day. So why are you making the switch? But then the other side of the coin, real meat, especially red meat, especially beef, is really not that healthy for you unless you're eating lean meat. It's full of saturated fats, super caloric, and honestly, depending on how you digest food, which is totally individual and there just isn't something in place for us to know that, you may not be that great at digesting animal proteins and you don't know it.
Mm-hmm. You know what else I think is interesting? That this was just a thought I had. In my life, a lot of the vegans and vegetarians I've come across, anytime I do, I'm always like, so why don't you eat meat? And it's a shocking amount of the time, like in my experience, more often than not, the answer is like, I just don't really like it. I think it's gross. Like, I've had so many people tell me that, and I'm like, wow, really? That's crazy. I love it. But then, like, those people aren't going to be interested in a bleeding burger.
Right. You know, they don't want to eat animal flesh. They certainly don't want to eat fake bleeding plant-based animal flesh.
The reason they don't like meat is because they think it's gross. Everything about it is gross to them. So, like, the fake thing that's, like, trying to, like, super closely imitate the real thing is not going to be appealing to them. They're going to be like, I would just rather have this garden veggie burger. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want fake bleeding something that's...
Yeah, they're like, give me a black bean patty.
Exactly. I just thought that was interesting too, because I've come across so many people that are like, I don't like it. I don't want to eat it.
And they have good alternatives too. I mean, that's what they do, some comparisons of like plant-based proteins and then meat alternatives, things like tofu or like a falafel, which is chickpea based, or even bean patties. So if you're not looking to eat meat, then you're going to go with the protein alternative that is healthier than the highly, highly processed plant-based meat anyway.
For sure.
So it's hard to find the audience, and I think it is finding an audience. I mean, obviously, fast food places carry plant-based patties now.
Yeah,
so
crazy,
there
right?
must be some huge demand. However, I did look at the numbers for it because there's a lot of what I think, especially on the inside of the industry, of the meat industry, is fear-mongering against plant-based burgers. Because why is there such a big pushback? Because plant-based meat alternatives are taking the market share of real meats. And so to preserve their industry and the farms and the, supply chain that exists, there's going to be pushback. So they were saying that, or rather the numbers I pulled from the internet is that there was something like 228 million plant-based burgers sold last year in the United States. That's a huge number.
A lot.
It's a huge number. You ready for a massive number? There was 6.4 billion beef burgers. 228 million versus 6.4 billion beef burgers. That means 28 times more beef patties were sold. So, is it fear-mongering? Yes, in my opinion. I think it's overblown. I don't think like having some alternative come to market and it being, honestly kind of a good thing for the planet overall is that negative, but I'm going to get to that point on my next page when we get there.
Okay.
But I think the environmental thing is huge for people too. What I was reading was health is number one and the environment is number two.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad that a lot of plant-based beefs, personally, I'm glad a lot of plant-based meats are replacing beef because cattle are one of the big producers of CO gases.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we want to touch on that too? No, you go first. And I have a whole thing.
We can definitely get to that. I have it's a little blurb kind of what I think is interesting because we discuss, meat alternatives and, plant-based meat is in that category. But there's a lot more. Like tofu was literally invented in China by the Han Dynasty somewhere between
5,000 years ago.
Somewhere between 206 BC and 220 CE. I mean, I don't even
so half the length.
It's insane.
Still, yeah.
So yeah, that was developed in the Middle Ages, and then
pre-Middle Ages.
In the Middle Ages, chopped nuts and grapes were used as a substitute for mincemeat during Lent. I mean, so it's very strange, but there's a lot of history to, meat alternatives. And now in today's day and age, we're kind of taking it to like another level and involving a lot of kind of science and technology in it. But with regards to the point that you made about beef, sorry guys.
She's flipping through her notes. They don't know what you're doing most of the time. I want you to understand that.
So yeah, you probably have these numbers, but animal agriculture takes up 83% of all agricultural land on Earth, right? Only supplies 18% of humanity's entire food supply. Beef alone uses 60% of that land, 60% of that 83%, and accounts for less than 2% of the calories consumed worldwide.
For pasture or also arable land that they use for raising feed?
I don't know. It said agricultural land on Earth. So I'll let you take that and run with it.
No, I'll touch on another point because I was looking at it because I was reading an article that was saying that there's, a lot of strikes against plant-based meat. And when I was reading those facts, I was like, well, they're not showing the other side of this coin. And that kind of ties into a bigger point I'll make later. But as far as the environment is concerned, 14.5% of all human-made emissions on the planet are from livestock. 65% of all of livestock emissions are from cattle.
Yep. Eat elk.
More than half.
Crazy.
And there's literally entire countries with populations of billions of people, India, that primarily do not eat beef or meat in general. So where's it all going? A lot of it goes to the American market, Asian markets, China, Russia, Western Europe, places that can afford meat. Mm-hmm. Conversation for another time.
Oh my goodness.
There's so much to unpack because I think what the plant-based meat industry is really doing, and I think I might just be coming to terms with it in this moment, is that it's doing something that we do or that we talk about doing. Mm-hmm. And that's disrupting the meat industry, is that there's changes being made, that there is a certain way to do things the right way. I think Fossil Farms, the way that we do things is, in my opinion, with a heavy amount of bias, because I like meat, is the right way, sustainably raised, and all natural and with humane practices of welfare from these animals and et cetera. But a lot of the meat isn't raised that way. So if people can get off of bad meat and switch to plant-based meat, I think I would rather that.
Yeah. And honestly, I love that relationship. That's not the right word. That you just made between kind of like what we do and what Fossil Farms and companies like Fossil Farms does and the plant-based meat industry is disrupting, shaking, trying to flip over on its head the, big ag and the traditional meat industry. And I think that's a beautiful comparison there because you're totally right. And like in reading a lot of these, like, there's this company that I'm super excited to talk about that super excited about it, but I'm super curious. And
I'm excited. This is a company to keep your eye on.
I think this is really cool. And everything I read about them, I was like, I love this. I love you guys. I love your message. So it's called Juicy Marbles. And it was, maybe is, I don't think it is anymore, but it was a Slovenian startup. And I'm not going to try to pronounce their last names, but I think this is so cool. These 4 guys who started the company. So it was founded by these guys, Tilen, who's a food technologist, Luca, who's a microbiologist, Maj, who's a biotechnologist, and Vladimir, who's a brand creative. And they have done...
One of those is not like the other.
Some great... You need that
guy. Sorry,
Vlad. So they've done some crazy... I mean, first of all, what they've done is think about all the plant-based meats on the market, right? It's ground, it's burgers, it's sausage, it's nuggets, it's this, it's that. What is it not? It's not a whole muscle. It's not a steak. Boom. Juicy Marbles introduces.
Don't sell them too hard.
Sorry. I'm super excited. I've never even had it, but I'm jazzed about, like, their energy is infectious. So they create a whole muscle plant-based meat. And I mean, effectively, they basically just created a loin that you can slice into fillets, you can shred. They have different ways that you cut it that they suggested this is like a strip steak and this is like a that. But effectively, they've created a loin and it has marbling in it.
Yeah.
And what I think is really cool, what is another thing that like has me...
And muscle fibers.
Muscle fibers jumping on the bandwagon is there's 8 ingredients in it, right? So I pulled up ingredients for like the Impossible Meat and the Beyond Burger, and they are 20 to 23 ingredients, a lot of which sound like kind of sketchy, right? There's 8 ingredients in the Juicy Marbles, and it's water, soy protein, sunflower oil, natural flavors, and then 2% or less of vegetable juice for color, carrageenan. This one's a little sketchy. Methyl cellulose. I didn't research it. I'm not a doctor. I'm sure it's
methyl cellulose is usually plant-based fibers, and I don't know what the methyl chain, because there's an alcohol chain involved with that.
Not a doctor.
I'm not. I have a history degree.
So literally just looking at that, I was like, oh, that sounds like, to me, as the consumer who hasn't tried plant-based meat since Tofurkey in the early 2000s, I'm like, oh, that sounds way friendlier. You know what I mean? Like, that's not as sketchy and scary. And so like you said, they have this proprietary protein texturing technology, and that's how they get like the muscle fibers. And their whole thing was like, we want to maximize the protein value and intake without like damaging any of the nutritional value of the ingredients. And they even have, like you said, they have patent pending. They just created their own 3D assembly technology.
I hope they never patent it.
I mean,
because then it goes to the patent office and people will find out about it, and then they can skirt that.
Cool. What do they have?
Hide it like WD-40. Never patent it. It's your secret forever.
It's
shout out WD-40, baby.
It's very cool. And you know what else they talk about is it's the environment. But Vlad, your buddy Vlad, is quoted as saying, we tend to talk about the need for plant-based diets solely from an environmental aspect, but that places the problem in the future when we already have a humanitarian issue at hand.
Correct.
He goes on to say, with 2 billion people dealing with food insecurity and 780 million people malnourished, we need to find a solution that works for now. So they are focused on the environment, but they're also focused on creating something that mimics a delicious protein in every way it possibly can and is more widely available. And their plan is they hit the market already, trying to be basically on par with the price of meat. Within the next couple of years, they plan to be cheaper than meat.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that they want to tackle the humanitarian part of the issue as well.
And I'm with you on that, because it is a crisis, because we talk about meat all the time, and we talk about accessibility to meat. We talk about accessibility to produce and food. And these are the things that we care about. Like, it makes me sad when people can't have a good meal or don't know how to enjoy it or literally can't eat in a day. That's like extremely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So having alternatives, I think, is always a good thing. Having options is always a good thing. The planet's changing rapidly, for better or for worse. I'd like to do something about it. As we all know, I've said it before on the podcast, I really don't eat beef anymore. Some of our programs I'll touch here and there, but I don't do it because cattle is atrociously bad for the environment. And it kind of touches on a lot of the pushback that plant-based meats have. They're all soy-based proteins. And so I was reading an article, and I'm going to
go on a little bit. They're not all soy.
Well, some are pea protein. The large, vast majority are soy-based proteins. And so we're going to go over something very briefly, and I am going to use my notes because I found I made a good point, and I hope it sounds as good out loud as it did in my head. But because one of the largest driving factors is the environment, you have good faith and bad faith actors, right? You have the plant-based meat industry trying to push their product and sell it for, try to dress it up as something. And, they don't talk about the negatives of high sodium. They don't talk about it being ultra processed unless they're making certain comparisons to other processed foods, et cetera, et cetera. That is what I would deem obfuscation, because you're not telling the entire truth. That comes from the other side of the coin being the meat industry. For instance, in Missouri, they had the Cattlemen's Association pushing for laws to change so that way meat alternatives couldn't be called meat because they don't want to have that affecting the industry. The same thing happened with the milk industry and nut-based milks, etc. So the article I'm reading that's pushing back against the plant-based meats goes something like this. Soy from South America is where they're raising forests and jungle to create arable land to plant soy. This is bad. This displaces not just animals, but also indigenous people. This is bad. I think we can all agree. If we stop eating meat, 5 million people, if not more, could be out of their jobs and not have an industry to switch to because that's all they've done their whole life. This is bad, right? We all agree with that. What are we not talking about? We're not talking about the fact that whatever millions of hectares are taken down for soy, the forest and jungle that they take, that land isn't usable for anywhere from 3 to 5 years to actually plant soybeans. So what do they do with the pasture? Because that's what it is. They raise cattle on it. Why are they raising forests and jungles to put in more soybean plantations? They're not raising soybeans for plant-based alternatives. They're raising them to feed cattle. The majority of the soybeans go back into the cattle that are raised on the land that the soybeans are. It's a cyclical issue that the beef industry isn't acknowledging, is that you're literally putting cattle onto pasture. You need more feed, so you're wrecking the jungle and taking, you're doing all the environmental harm to what? And then you're saying that soybeans are the problem? The soybeans are raised to feed the cattle.
Take it easy, Ben.
It makes me feel crazy because there's clearly biases on both ends, right? But I think the obfuscation, the purposeful act of not sharing all the information to make one party look bad and one party look good is terrible for the consumer. They're the one who loses at the end of the day. End of story. I don't know why it is. No, I do know why this is this way, because of money, right? And at the end of the day, it's always about money. But you can do things the right way. You can sustainably grow soy and not have to put it into, raised jungles. You can raise animals properly on grass, in pasture, in the places that they should be raised.
Yeah.
And it should be a global food system, but we're doing it the wrong way. And I think, I guess my whole point is that if you're doing your research, it is a very personal thing to you, your diet, your personal food philosophies and beliefs that you have. And you should take everything with a grain of salt. If you read a fact, look it up.
Fact check it.
Yeah, fact check yourself. I mean, fact check stuff all the time. You should constantly be looking at it and questioning authorities, especially.
He did a fun thing. You got to watch the video.
Yeah, watch the video.
Not to be like...
Always be a punk and always fight authority, because you never know what they're telling you. The truth is out there. Or rather, I mean, it really is this, right? There's always three sides to a story. There's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth.
Anyway, that's not the end of the podcast. I'm going back to Juicy Marbles.
But they're doing it the right way, and that's the kind of thing that I love.
So this episode is not sponsored by Juicy Marbles, but one of my dinners very soon certainly will be, because I'm dying to try it. And it does not fall into the category of highly processed. And they use non-saturated fats and are like lower in sodium than meat. And they are actually the first investment by this brand new climate tech investor called World Fund. And they launched a $350 million fund to support the next generation of founders focused on the climate crisis, yada, yada.
Whoa, but, that's a lot of money.
They are, I mean, one of the first pages of this touches on how Juicy Marbles with World Fund raised $4.5 million to bring their product to market at a reasonable cost.
That's a really small number.
Well, I mean, so they have a new category, right? It's the plant-based whole cuts. And I forget.
Okay.
Right. And I mean, we kind of talked about that, but I forget where it says in here, but it's very funny. It's like the something 9000 is like their secret machine for making it. But to me, it's very interesting because in listening to these quotes of these founders, first of all, they're hilarious. Their website is super funny, and I'm laughing with them, and I'm I like the vibe in the room that you guys are projecting here, and it makes me laugh. And they just all they all have these different points. One of them says, we have premium A5 grade cuts of meat, and we, he says, we'll achieve price parity at launch and we'll beat the price of animal meat within the next couple of years, this and that. Scale of operations, like you said.
Yeah.
The next one says, what's super important to us is that the nutritional profile doesn't get damaged. We want the end customers to get a wholesome, nutritious piece of meat that has all the protein and all the nutritional value they need.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Where have you heard that before? In this building. They have the same end goal.
Yeah,
right?
same angle. And then you have Vlad, who talks about, listen, we have a problem now. We need to diversify our protein source. We need to play a part in making, in ending this hunger problem. And then you already have the other founder, Luca. He says, we're making plans. We want to nourish 10 billion people by 2050. We have to beat the subsidized price of animal meat. We have to we got to figure out a sustainable agricultural system so that we don't create a biodiversity collapse. Anyway.
Yeah, because that's 25 years from now. There's going to be 2 billion more people on this planet. Yeah. I don't think we can understand the scale of that.
So anyway, this episode is not brought to you by Juicy Marbles, but if I had to pick a company to support, even though I haven't had any of their product or any of the other products on the market, I would pick them just because I think it's super freaking cool what they did. A bunch of scientists who, like, some of them are vegans, some of them are meat eaters, and they came together and
try it out. Don't be afraid is what I think we're getting at. Try it. If it's not for you, it's not for you.
No, and it very well might not be. Probably is not for me because I love eating all types of different meat. I love the game we carry here. I love bacon so much. Turkey bacon is awful.
I'm eating animal protein tonight. End of story. I eat animal protein every single day of my life. It might be too much. I don't care.
What excites me is, so I did this research about Beyond and Impossible, and how they came up strong and then they floundered a little and now they're still kind of trying to figure it out, right? But when I read about this company, I was like, that's pretty cool. I hope there's more of this. More people who are like, okay, I see what you're all doing, but you're missing this boat entirely. So figure it out. Figure out a way to do this and make it cleaner and don't process it so much and think about the world and not just your own problem. I mean, somewhere on their website, they're like, is this a way to save the environment or to pay a fun way to pay rent? And they're like, a little bit of both, but we think it's really neat. And I'm like, that's just cool. Like, whatever.
They're very self-aware.
They're
marketing,
like, but they are very self-aware. Yeah. And I really vibe with that. So I don't know.
What country are they from? Slovenia?
Oh yeah, it's a Slovenian startup.
Man, that's that Eastern European chill. They're just like, man, we've been through it for the last 100 years. We're finally in our feet under us.
They're so cool. I really want to try. I mean, on their website, you got all these people from Canada. Like,
let's call them.
When are you going to launch it here? Yeah, I think you already did the U.S. launch. So I'm sorry. I don't know why I haven't ordered yet.
We had some in this building over a year ago that your good friend and my good mentor, Ben Del Coro, had and showed us. And I was like, why on earth? I don't think he cooked here, but I was shocked when he handed me this burnt orange box with black writing on it. It was just funky. A log of meat. It's such interesting advertising.
It's so funky.
The whole thing's fascinating from a very modern, item to market kind of.
Their mascot is thing, Mr.
Right?
Marbles. He's a cat with cool sunglasses on.
Yeah,
I'm on board. I'm on board. I'm rowing the boat. So anyway, not brought to you by Juicy
Target
Marbles.
demographic, witchy women, for sure.
Who have cats.
But try some meats. Try some plant-based alternatives. Think about what your food philosophy is and what you find value in.
I think everything in balance is super important.
Yeah, everything in balance.
I would like to eat.
And love yourself.
A little bit.
Always.
Love yourself always. That's beautiful. Is it time to end? I don't want to. That's
it is that
way. It's beautiful. So you heard it from him first. Love yourself. Try plant-based meat. Don't eat tofu. It's better with soy sauce.
Or come see us. We'll have a conversation and get some good meat.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. That was a little bit more on track than the last one. But regardless, don't forget to like, subscribe, watch it on YouTube so you can see our silly faces and hear Ben silently laughing at me. And as always, thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.